Hello everyone. Today I want to reveal to you the reason why smart people are often hated and feel lonely. Have you ever noticed your depth being mistaken for coldness? Your need for genuine connection pushing away the very people you thought would value your core? The more authentically you live, the more isolated you feel. But here's a brutal truth no one wants to admit: your intelligence isn't driving people away. It's revealing who was never meant to stay in the first place. Arthur Schopenhauer understood something about human nature that most people refuse to accept. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. But you've learned this lesson the hard way. Every time you've tried to fit in, to play the expected role, to perform the dance of social approval, something inside you has died. You aren't dangerous because you lack empathy. You're dangerous because you possess something far more terrifying than aggression: authenticity. And in a world built on artifice, an authentic presence becomes an act of rebellion. Most people navigate relationships through what I call emotional theatrics. They've memorized scripts for love, learned choreographed reactions for conflict, and perfected performances designed to gain validation. But you stopped memorizing lines years ago. When you meet someone new, you don't ask, "How do I impress them?" You ask, "Who are they beneath the mask?" This fundamental shift in questioning changes everything about how others experience you. Nietzsche wrote about herd mentality, how most humans seek security in collective thought, collective behavior, collective unconsciousness. But the thinking man inevitably stands outside the herd, not because he's superior, but because he's awake. And awakening, true awakening, is always a solitary experience. Women don't fear your intelligence because it threatens their intellect. They fear it because it threatens their illusions. When you look at someone with clear eyes, when you hear what's beneath their words, when you're unmoved by emotional manipulation, you become a living reminder of what a genuine connection truly demands. Most people confuse intensity with depth, chaos with passion, clinginess with love. But you've developed what philosophers call the discerning eye, the ability to see what is real versus what only appears to be. And that discernment makes you incompatible with those still living in surface appearances. Schopenhauer spoke of intellectual solitude, an isolation that comes not from being rejected, but from being fundamentally different in how you process reality. You think before you feel. You observe before you react. You question before you accept. These aren't character flaws. They are hallmarks of conscious evolution. But consciousness comes with a price. The more aware you become, the smaller your world shrinks. Not because you become antisocial, but because you become selective. You'd rather have no relationship than an inauthentic one. You'd rather be alone than pretend to be someone you're not. This selectivity terrifies those who measure their worth by how many people want them. They can't comprehend choosing solitude over compromise, because they've never tasted the peace that comes from full self-acceptance. You've probably noticed how conversations shift when you walk into a room. How superficial chatter dies down. How people become self-conscious about their words, their jokes, their casual cruelties. This isn't because you're judgmental. It's because your presence demands authenticity from others. And most people are terrified of being authentic. The intelligent person develops what I call a psychological sonar, the ability to detect mismatches between what people say and what they feel, between the public persona and the private reality. This isn't mind reading, it's the recognition of patterns developed over years of careful observation. Once you possess this keen level of awareness, conventional relationships become impossible. You can't unsee the games once you've learned to recognize them. You can't participate in emotional manipulation once you understand its mechanics. You can't feign harmony once you've experienced true connection. This creates what philosophers call the burden of consciousness, the burden of seeing clearly in a world that prefers comfortable blindness. Every interaction becomes a choice. Do you play along with the illusion? Or do you stand firm in reality? Most men choose the illusion. It's easier to pretend that clinginess is romantic. Jealousy is passion. Confusion is harmony. But you've chosen the harder path. The path of psychological integrity. Nietzsche understood that higher men must create their own values. Because society's values are designed for the masses. not for independent thinkers. You've begun this process of value creation in your own life, where others see success in terms of acquisition, attention, approval, sexual conquest. You've begun to measure success in terms of alignment. How authentically are you living? How much have you preserved your true essence? How well does your outer life align with your inner values? This re-evaluation of values makes you incompatible with conventional dating culture. You can no longer celebrate hollow victories or pursue meaningless connections. You've developed what the ancient Greeks called sophrosine, the wisdom of knowing what is truly valuable. The thinking person also realizes that most human interactions operate on unconscious contracts. I'll pretend to be impressed by you if you pretend to be impressed by me. I'll validate your ego if you validate mine. I'll play the role you want if you play the role I want. But you've cancelled these contracts. You refuse to trade authenticity for acceptance. You won't perform masculinity to gain femininity. You won't feign less intelligence to make others feel more comfortable. This refusal to participate in the unconscious bartering makes you seem off-putting to those still operating within these systems. They can't understand what you want from them, because you want nothing but honesty, and honesty is something most people cannot give. Schopenhauer wrote of the world as will and representation, the difference between how things truly are and how we represent them to ourselves. Most people live entirely in representation, in the stories they tell themselves about reality. But you've glimpsed the wool beneath the representation. You've seen the raw motives, the unconscious urges, the primal needs that most romantic behaviors try to camouflage. Once you see the wool beneath the representation, you're no longer captivated by superficial appearances. You seek core value, not style, depth, not showmanship, character, not charisma. This creates a filtering effect that most people experience as rejection. Your standards automatically weed out those who haven't done their own inner work. Your authenticity repels those still wearing masks. Your depth intimidates those living on the surface. But this filtering is not a bug. It's a feature. Every person who feels threatened by your intelligence is revealing their own psychological immaturity. Every woman who prefers performance over presence is showing you that she's not ready for true intimacy. The intelligent person learns to read these signals not as personal failures, but as useful information. You're not being rejected, you're being categorized. Reality is sorting the conscious from the unconscious, the authentic from the artificial, the ready from the unready. This sorting process can feel brutal, because it happens in isolation. Unlike the person rejected for obvious reasons, rudeness, poverty, ugliness, you are rejected for invisible reasons most people can't even articulate. They'll say you're too intense when they mean you're too real. They'll call you emotionally unavailable when they mean you're emotionally self-possessed. They'll say you think too much when they mean a little thinking makes me uncomfortable. These misdiagnoses used to baffle you. Now you recognize them as translations. When someone says you're too much, they're really saying they are not enough. When they declare you complicated, they're revealing their own simplicity. When they accuse you of being cold, they're admitting to their own emotional chaos. Nietzsche spoke of amor fati, the love of one's fate, including its difficulties. The intelligent person learns to love his isolation because he understands its purpose. Every rejection teaches him about his own worth. Every misunderstanding clarifies his values. Every lonely night deepens his self-knowledge. You're not being punished for your intelligence. You're being prepared. Prepared for the rare encounter with someone who has also done the work of becoming conscious. Someone who has also questioned everything, faced their shadow, and emerged with their soul intact. When two such people meet, there's no performance because there's nothing to hide. No games because there's nothing to win. No manipulation because there's nothing to control. There is only recognition, the profound relief of being seen and accepted for who you truly are. But this encounter requires patience, faith, and a willingness to walk alone until it happens. Most men cannot pay this price. They'd rather settle for superficial connections than endure the depths of solitude. You've chosen differently. You've chosen truth over comfort, depth over convenience, authenticity over acceptance. And that choice, difficult as it is, has made you dangerous to a system built on unconsciousness. The unconscious world needs men to be predictable, controllable, manipulable. It needs them to chase approval, seek validation, perform for attention. When a man steps out of this system, when he becomes self-sufficient and selective, he threatens the entire economy of emotional manipulation. Your intelligence has freed you from the matrix of mutual need that keeps most relationships trapped in dysfunctional cycles. You no longer need someone to complete you because you've learned to complete yourself. You no longer need validation because you've learned to validate yourself. You no longer need approval because you've learned to approve of yourself. This self-sufficiency is more attractive than any performance. But it's also more intimidating than any aggression. Because once a man is truly independent, he can only be chosen, never trapped. The woman who will appreciate your intelligence exists. But she's also on this conscious path. She's also questioning everything, facing her shadow, choosing authenticity over acceptance. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's rescuing herself. And when you meet her, you'll recognize each other instantly. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Not because you complete each other, but because you complement each other. Two whole people choosing each other, not two desperate halves trying to become one. Until that encounter happens, the work continues, not the work of finding someone, but the work of becoming someone. Someone who doesn't need a relationship to feel whole, but will welcome a congruent one. Someone who isn't afraid to be alone, yet remains open to genuine connection. Now, your intelligence isn't a curse. It's a compass. It guides you away from illusion and towards truth. Away from performance and towards presence. Away from desperation and towards dignity. The conscious path is narrow and often solitary, but it leads to something most people never find: a life that reflects your deepest values. Relationships that honor your authentic self. And the unwavering peace that comes from never having to pretend to be someone you're not. Schopenhauer once said, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. For it is only when he is alone that he is truly free." You've learned to love your solitude because you've learned to love your freedom. Freedom from other people's expectations. Freedom from social scripts. Freedom from the exhausting performance of being accepted. And that freedom, quiet as it may seem, is the most revolutionary force in the world. Because a man who is truly free cannot be controlled, cannot be manipulated, cannot be shrunk down to play other people's games. You are not flawed for preferring depth over surface, truth over comfort, authenticity over acceptance. You have evolved, and evolution by definition means leaving the old behind and embracing the new. The world needs men like you now more than ever. Men who think before they act. Men who feel deeply but don't react emotionally. Men who see clearly through the fog of social conditioning. Your intelligence is your gift to the world, even if the world doesn't know how to receive it. Keep thinking, keep questioning, keep living authentically, because somewhere out there, there's someone who needs exactly what you bring. The rare gift of a genuine human connection, unblemished by performance, manipulation, or need. So, how does this transformation actually play out in reality? The intelligent person begins to notice subtle shifts in how he moves through the world. His pace slows, not because he's lazy, but because he's no longer rushing to seek external validation. He walks with the quiet confidence of a man who has found his center and refuses to be unbalanced by the chaos of others. His way of speaking changes, too. Where he might have once filled silences with anxious chatter, he now lets the silence breathe. He finds his words carry more weight when he uses fewer of them. People listen when he speaks because they sense that what he's about to say has been deeply considered. This economy of language initially makes others uncomfortable. They're used to men who overshare, explain themselves repeatedly, seek approval through words, but your measured responses force them to truly listen instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. The intelligent person also develops what ancient Stoic philosophers called preferential indifference, the ability to have preferences without being enslaved by them. He prefers genuine connection but isn't desperate for it. He prefers truth but can deal with lies. He prefers depth but can navigate superficial interactions when necessary. This emotional flexibility makes him both more attractive and more intimidating. Attractive because desperation repels people. Intimidating because people can't figure out how to control someone who needs nothing from them. In professional settings, this transformation becomes no less apparent. You stop vying for attention in meetings and start contributing when you genuinely have something valuable to add. You stop networking frantically and start building relationships based on mutual respect rather than mutual exploitation. Your colleagues begin to treat you differently, some with newfound respect, others with uneasy bewilderment. They can't slot you into the usual categories of aggressive climber or passive follower. You've become something else entirely, someone playing a completely different game. The dating world becomes particularly interesting to navigate once you've undergone this psychological evolution. You find yourself genuinely bewildered by behaviors that once seemed normal. The woman who creates drama to test your commitment. The one who withholds affection to see if you'll chase. The one who flirts with other men to make you jealous. These strategies designed to hook unconscious men bounce off you like arrows off armor. Not because you're cold, but because you recognize them as attempts at manipulation. And once you see manipulation clearly, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend it's love. You can't engage in the game. This creates an interesting dynamic as women begin to test you in increasingly creative ways. Trying to find the lever that will make you react, compete, perform. When they realize no such lever exists, they typically cycle through predictable stages: confusion, frustration, respect, or departure. Those who depart were not for you anyway. Those who develop respect are the ones worth getting to know more deeply. Schopenhauer understood that most human suffering comes from wanting things to be other than they are. But the intelligent person has learned the art of acceptance without resignation. He accepts reality while striving to improve what can be improved, and finding peace with what cannot be changed. This philosophical approach extends to how you handle rejection, criticism, and misunderstanding, where these experiences might have once sent you spiraling into self-doubt. They now provide useful information about others' capacity for authenticity. When someone calls you too serious, you hear, "I'm not ready for depth." When they say you're emotionally unavailable, you translate it to, "I need constant emotional validation." When they declare you think too much, you understand they mean, "A little thinking makes me uncomfortable." These translations aren't meant to be judgmental, they're meant to be accurate. And accuracy in human relationships is a rare and valuable skill. The intelligent person also learns to differentiate between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected from others. Solitude is the joy of being connected to yourself. Once you master this distinction, being alone no longer feels like a punishment but begins to feel like a privilege. You begin to cherish quiet mornings, contemplative walks, evenings spent reading or reflecting. These aren't consolation prizes for not finding companionship. They are the foundations of your psychological strength. This comfort with solitude has an unexpected side effect. It makes you attractive to other people who value depth. They sense your self-sufficiency and are drawn to it like moths to a flame. Not because they want to possess it, but because they recognize something they are missing within themselves. The paradox becomes clear. The less you need people, the more the right people want to be around you. The more whole you become, the more appealing you are to others who are also striving for wholeness. But this attraction comes with a responsibility. When someone is drawn to your scented presence, you must discern whether they are seeking to learn from your example or simply hoping to use you as an emotional stabilizer. The former leads to genuine connection. The latter leads to another performance-based relationship. Learning to quickly differentiate this becomes crucial. You develop what I call a truth radar, the ability to sense whether someone is interested in who you truly are, or who they imagine you could be for them. The tells become clear once you know what to look for. Genuine interest asks about your thoughts, your values, your perspectives. Inauthentic interest focuses on what you can provide: security, status, entertainment, emotional regulation. Genuine people want to understand your boundaries and respect them. Inauthentic people probe for weaknesses they can exploit or barriers they can erode over time. Genuine people appreciate your complexity and don't try to simplify you for their comfort. Inauthentic people want you to be consistent, predictable, easy to categorize. Most importantly, genuine people bring their own completeness to the interaction. They aren't looking to you to fill their emptiness. They're looking for someone whose fullness complements their own. This level of discernment, while protective, can at times feel isolating. You watch friends and colleagues enter relationships that you can see are headed for predictable disaster. You want to warn them, but you've learned that people must discover their own patterns in their own time. Your role isn't to save others from their choices. It's to model what conscious choosing looks like. Your life becomes a silent demonstration of what's possible when a person commits to psychological evolution over psychological comfort. Some will be inspired by your example. Others will be intimidated by it. Most will simply be bewildered by it. And that's perfectly fine. You don't live your life to be understood by everyone. You live to be true to yourself. The intelligent person eventually realizes that his past frustrations with dating and relationships weren't really about finding love. They were about finding himself. The journey that began with, "Why don't women appreciate my intelligence?" has evolved into, "How can I become the man worthy of appreciation?" This shift from external to internal focus changes everything. You stop trying to find the right person and start becoming the right person. You stop looking for someone to complete you and start completing yourself. You stop seeking validation and start creating value. And ironically, this internal focus makes you far more attractive than any external strategy ever could. Because a man who is actively becoming the best version of himself radiates an energy that no pickup technique or performance can replicate. The woman who is meant for you will recognize this energy instantly. She won't need to be convinced of your worth. She'll see it in how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you make decisions, how you treat others, how you handle challenges. She won't be impressed by your accomplishments. She'll be drawn to your character. She won't be mesmerized by your performance. She'll love your presence. She won't want to change you. She'll want to grow with you. When you find someone operating at this level of consciousness, the relationship unfolds differently than anything you've ever experienced before. There are no games because neither of you needs to win. There is no manipulation because neither of you needs to control. There is no performance because neither of you needs to impress. They are simply two whole people choosing to share their wholeness, not two broken people trying to fix each other. But until that encounter happens, the work continues, not the work of finding someone, but the work of becoming someone. Someone who doesn't need a relationship to feel whole, but will welcome a congruent one. Someone who isn't afraid to be alone, yet remains open to genuine connection. The path of the intelligent person is not easy. It demands the courage to think independently, the strength to stand alone, and the wisdom to discern between what deserves your energy and what doesn't. It demands that you develop your own values instead of inheriting society's. That you create your own meaning instead of accepting what others offer. But this difficulty is also its gift. Because every challenge overcome makes you stronger. Every lonely night endured makes you more self-sufficient. Every misguided connection abandoned makes space for a real one. You are not flawed for wanting more than most people settle for. You are not broken for refusing to accept superficial connections. You are not defective for choosing authenticity over approval. You have evolved, and evolution by definition means leaving the old behind and embracing the new. The world needs men like you more than ever. Men who think before they act. Men who feel deeply but don't react emotionally. Men who see clearly through the fog of social conditioning. Your intelligence is your gift to the world. Even if the world doesn't know how to receive it. Keep thinking, keep questioning, keep living authentically, because somewhere out there, there's someone who needs exactly what you bring. The rare gift of a genuine human connection. Unblemished by performance, manipulation, or need. If this resonates with your experience, share it with someone who needs to hear that their depth is not a flaw. Subscribe for more content that celebrates your intelligence instead of asking you to hide it. Your mind matters. Your standards matter. Your refusal to settle for anything less than an authentic connection matters more than you know.